My wife left a note saying, "Don't look for me. I need freedom." So I didn't. I filed for divorce, froze the accounts, and went on vacation. 3 days later, the world would collapse, but in that moment, the silence was the only thing that mattered. The townhouse usually smelled like espresso at 6 in the evening. Tonight it smelled like stale air and lemon polish. The rain pressed flat against the dark windows, sealing the house in a gray gloom. I walked into the kitchen, expecting the usual domestic choreography we had perfected over 12 years. The hiss of the kettle. The click of Elena's heels on the hardwood. Instead, there was a stillness that felt heavy, like the air before a system failure. I am a senior risk analyst for a logistics firm. My life is built on predicting failures before they happen. I noticed deviations. The Scandinavian chair Elena loved was turned 2 inches to the left. The wedding photo on the mantel leaned at a slight tilt, as if someone had brushed past it in a hurry. A clod of dried mud sat on the pristine wool rug where her running shoes had been kicked off. These were small data points, but together, they formed a pattern of disruption. On the granite island, weighted down by her brass key, was a scrap of paper. Her handwriting was neat, the loops of the letters precise. It read, "I need to be on my own for a while. This is not working for me anymore. I need freedom. Don't look for me." There was no apology. No date. No tear stains. I stood there until the cold from the window seeped into my shirt. My first instinct was not to scream or collapse. My first instinct was to verify. In my line of work, panic is an inefficiency. Panic causes you to miss the variables that matter. I picked up the note. It smelled faintly of her vanilla perfume. I did not fall apart. I started cataloging. I walked to the bedroom. The bed was made in a sharp, military line, which was unlike her. Her closet was thinned out, but not empty. The expensive coats were gone. The sentimental items, like the jewelry box from her grandmother, were missing. This was not a panic decision. This was a logistical operation. I went back to the kitchen. The note claimed an impulsive need for space. The scene screamed calculated extraction. I opened the jump drawer, where we kept takeout menus and spare batteries. My fingers brushed against a piece of paper that felt different. It was stiff, high-quality printer paper. I pulled it out. It was a printed confirmation for a hotel reservation at the Hotel Lucia downtown. The booking was made 4 days ago. The name on the reservation was not hers, but the credit card digits matched our joint account. She had booked a luxury suite under an alias days before she supposedly decided she needed sudden freedom. The narrative of the note crumbled. Impulsive people do not book suites 4 days in advance. Desperate people do not leave the bed perfectly made. This was a staged event. She wanted me to think she was running into the unknown, but she was merely moving to a new location she had already secured. I felt a cold, efficient anger settle in my chest. It was the same feeling I got when a supply chain snapped because of negligence. I did not call her sister. I did not call her friends to beg for answers. I sat down at my laptop and opened the banking portal. My fingers moved across the keyboard with muscle memory. I transferred my personal savings into a secure holding account she could not touch. Then, I flagged the joint checking account for suspicious activity. I called the bank's fraud department. I told them I suspected unauthorized access. The clerk asked if I had my card. I said yes. He froze the account immediately. I protected the assets. I secured the perimeter. Next, I called Marcus, a lawyer I had met at a corporate mixer years ago. He was expensive and vicious. I left a voicemail saying I needed to file immediately. I looked at the note one last time. I folded it and put it in my pocket. Not as a keepsake, but as evidence. I packed a bag. Not with clothes for work, but with hiking gear. I needed to be where the air was thin, and the variables were simple. I walked out of the house, locked the door, and got into my car. I was not chasing her. I was initiating a containment protocol. She wanted freedom. I would give her the most expensive version of it she had ever known. The bank confirmed the freeze on the joint accounts 12 minutes after I made the call. With the immediate hemorrhage stopped. I needed to secure the legal firewall, so I drove straight to the glass tower where Marcus Hale kept his office. Marcus was a man who viewed marriage as a contract law dispute that hadn't happened yet. He did not offer tea or sympathy when I laid the handwritten note on his mahogany desk. He picked it up with the tips of his fingers, read the 4 lines, and let out a short, dry laugh. "Amateur," he said. He tossed the paper back to me. "Leaving a note is theatrical. It implies she wants the last word. If she really wanted freedom, she would have just vanished. This is a performance, Walter." I told him about the hotel booking I had found. I told him about the discrepancies in the bedroom. Marcus nodded, his eyes already moving to the legal pad, where he was drafting a motion. "Slept. He told me to keep the house secure and to document everything. He said we would file for abandonment on Monday morning. He called it a strategic strike. I called it damage control." I left his office feeling a strange, hollow vibration in my chest. It wasn't grief. It was the hum of adrenaline. My phone buzzed in my pocket as I stepped into the elevator. It was a notification from a private server I used for encrypted emails. I checked the screen. The sender was unknown. The subject line was blank. The body of the email contained no text, only a single attachment. It was a photograph. I opened it. The image was high resolution. It showed the kitchen island in my townhouse. In the center of the frame was the note Elena had written. "I need freedom. Don't look for me." But the angle was wrong. It was taken from above, looking down. And at the edge of the frame, just barely visible, was a coffee mug sitting on a coaster. I stared at the screen until the elevator doors opened. The note in the picture was crisp. The lighting suggested it was taken during the day. But I had found the note in the evening, in the dark. Someone had photographed the scene hours before I arrived. I turned around and went back to my car. I drove to the townhouse, breaking the speed limit twice. I needed to see the physical space again. When I unlocked the front door, the silence of the house felt aggressive. I walked to the kitchen island. The note was in my pocket, but the memory of its placement was burned into my mind. I pulled up the photo on my phone and held it over the granite counter, aligning the perspective. The photo showed the note. To the right, in the image, was a slate coaster with a half-empty mug of black coffee. Elena did not drink black coffee. She drank lattes with oat milk. More importantly, Elena despised the slate coasters. She claimed they scratched the sealant on the granite. She kept them in the back of the drawer and only brought them out when we had guests. I opened the dishwasher. It was empty. I checked the sink. It was clean. I opened the trash can. Buried under a paper towel was a disposable coffee cup from a shop across town, and at the bottom, the slate coaster, broken in half. I pieced the slate together on the counter. It matched the one in the photo. The implications slotted into place, like a row of falling dominoes. Elena had not been alone when she wrote that note. Someone had been here with her. Someone who drank black coffee and used the coaster she hated. The photo in my email was not a warning. It was a taunt. It was proof that while I was at work, managing risk for billion-dollar supply chains. Someone had been in my kitchen, managing the exit of my wife. I felt the temperature in the room drop. Or, perhaps it was just my blood running cold. This was not an emotional crisis. This was a coordinated event. I walked to the hallway closet where the home server was stored. Slept. I unlocked the cage and pulled up the network logs. If they had been here for hours, they had done something other than drink coffee. I scanned the traffic for the last 24 hours. The network activity spike was impossible to miss. At 2 in the afternoon, 4 hours before I came home, there was a massive outgoing data transfer. 3 terabytes of data had been uploaded to an external cloud server. I traced the file paths. They hadn't just downloaded movies or photos. They had copied everything. My tax returns. My investment portfolios. Scans of my passport and birth certificate. The deed to the house. Even the encrypted backups of my work files. I sat back on the cold floor of the closet. The sadness that had been threatening to surface all evening evaporated instantly. In its place, a cold, hard clarity took over. Elena had not left me because she fell out of love. She had not left me because she needed to find herself. She had been extracted. The note, the stage bedroom, the hotel reservation, it was all camouflage. I was not looking at a divorce case. I was looking at a heist. My phone buzzed again. Another email from the same anonymous account. This time, there was text. It read, "Do not follow the money. You will not like where it goes." I stood up and locked the server cage. I walked to the kitchen and picked up the broken pieces of the slate coaster. I wrapped them in a paper towel and put them in my pocket. They were no longer trash. They were physical evidence. I grabbed my bag. The house was compromised. The network was compromised. Staying here was a tactical error. I needed to go to the one place where the signal could not reach me, a place where I could think without the static of surveillance. I headed for the door, my hand checking for the keys, my mind already calculating the next move. I was done reacting. It was time to hunt. I drove north until the city became a smudge of amber light in the rearview mirror, and the radio signal dissolved into static. The road to Mount wound upward through corridors of Douglas fir that stood, like black, iron bars, against the night sky. The cabin I had rented was a small A-frame structure sitting alone on a ridge. It was designed for tourists who wanted to pretend they were pioneers for a weekend, but for me, it was a sterile environment. No shared history. No memories. No ghosts of a marriage to walk through. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. The air was cold and smelled of pine resin and dust. I did not turn on the main lights. I set my bag on the floor and walked to the window to look out at the darkness. This was supposed to be a tactical retreat. I had told ourselves I needed to clear my head to plan the legal counterstrike against the theft of my data. But as the silence of the mountain settled around me, I realized I had made a miscalculation. In the city, the noise of the investigation kept me occupied. Here, there was only the hum of the refrigerator and the wind. I unpacked with mechanical precision. Hiking boots by the door. Flashlight on the table. Laptop on the desk. I built a perimeter of objects to keep the reality at bay, but the silence penetrated everything. It forced me to think about the quiet moments in my marriage. The way Elena would sigh when I talked about risk assessment. The way she would look out the window during dinner, her reflection staring back at her. I had always interpreted her distance as boredom with my stability. Now, in the vacuum of this cabin, I wondered if it had been the early stages of an exit strategy I was too blind to see. I sat in the single leather armchair, and stared at the unlit fireplace. For the first time in 20 years, I felt the structural weakness of my own life. I had built a fortress of competence and financial security, believing it was enough to sustain a partnership. I had treated my marriage like a server that just needed to be kept online. I had failed to notice that the user had logged out years ago. The loneliness hit me, not as a wave of emotion, but as a physical weight in my chest, a pressure that made it hard to expand my lungs. I closed my eyes, trying to force my mind back to the data breach, to the slate coaster, to the facts. My phone buzzed against the hard wood of the side table. The sound was violent in the stillness. I opened my eyes. The screen lit up the room with a pale blue glow. It was a voicemail notification. The signal up here was weak, fading in and out with the wind, but the packet of data had made it through. I picked up the phone. The number was blocked. I pressed play and held the device to my ear. The voice was young, female, and trembling. She was breathing shallowly, as if she had just run up a flight of stairs or was hiding in a closet. "Mr. Vance," she said. Her voice cracked on my name. "You do not know me. Please do not hang up. You think your wife is having an affair. You think she fell in love with someone else." There was a pause. I heard the distinct sound of a door closing in the background on her end. "She is not in love," the woman continued, her voice dropping to a whisper. "She is being managed. The man she is with, his name is Silas. He is not a hotel guest. He is a venture capitalist, or that is what he calls himself. This is what he does. He targets women who feel undervalued. He tells them they are protagonists in a movie they have not started filming yet. He isolates them. He extracts their assets. And then he disappears." I sat up straight, my grip tightening on the phone. "He did this to a woman in Seattle 6 months ago," the voice said. "And another in Denver before that. It is a cycle. It is a business model. Elena is not a partner, Mr. Vance. She is an asset class. He is going to liquidate her. I cannot watch him do it again." The recording ended with a sharp click. I played it again. Then a third time. I listened not just to the words, but to the cadence. The fear in her voice was genuine. The specific terminology she used, asset class, liquidate, was not the language of a scorned lover. It was the language of finance. It was the language of my world. I walked to the window and looked out at the invisible tree line. For the last 48 hours, I had been carrying the heavy, dull shame of a husband who was too boring to keep his wife. I had accepted the narrative that I was the deficiency, that my lack of spontaneity was the crime. The truth felt like a betrayal of the stability I had craved since my chaotic childhood. But this voicemail shifted the axis of the world. If this woman was telling the truth, I was not a failure of a husband. I was a target. And Elena was not a villain. She was a victim. A strange, cold sensation washed over me. It was relief. It was a terrible, twisted kind of relief, but it allowed me to breathe again. Being unlovable is a condition you cannot fix. Being swindled is a problem you can solve. I sat down at the desk and opened my laptop. I connected to the spotty cellular hotspot. I had a name now. Silas. And I had a witness. The woman had not left her name, but she had left a digital footprint. I typed the name Silas into my search parameters, cross-referencing it with venture capital firms operating in the Pacific Northwest. I felt the old machinery of my mind waking up. The grief was still there, sitting in the corner of the room like a wet coat. But the panic was gone. I had a variable to track. I was no longer just a man waiting out the storm in a cabin. I was an analyst with a data set. I looked at the phone again. The stranger had reached out across the void. She had offered me a key. I whispered to the empty room. I am listening. I prepared to dig. If Silas treated people like assets, he would have left a paper trail. And if he was looking for profit, he had made a mistake coming after mine. I opened a new terminal window, ready to tear apart the digital life of the man who thought he could steal mine. But before I could type a single command, a notification popped up on my screen. It was a system alert from the laptop I had recovered from our storage unit years ago. Elena's old machine. Someone was trying to access it remotely. The notification on the screen pulsed like a warning beacon, signaling an intrusion into the digital ghost of my marriage. I knew I had seconds, maybe minutes, before the invisible hand reached the core of the drive, so I typed in the password. It was a combination of digits I had used for a decade, derived from the date of our wedding. September 12th. The irony tasted like copper in my mouth as I used the symbol of our union to unlock the evidence of its destruction. The progress bar spun, and the drive opened. I bypassed the folders labeled photos and documents. I went straight to the system directory where Elena, who was not tech-savvy, would hide things she didn't want me to see. Buried inside a folder innocuously named tax receipts was a directory that did not belong. It was labeled Project Liberation. I clicked it open. I expected to find the artifacts of an affair. I braced myself for snapshots of a hotel room, love letters, or screenshots of intimate texts. I was prepared for heartbreak. I was not prepared for a business plan. The folder contained a series of spreadsheets. The first one was titled Liquidation Schedule. I opened it, and the rows and columns blurred into a horrifying clarity. It was a ledger of my life. Every asset I owned was listed with forensic precision. My 401k. The equity in the townhouse. The emergency savings account. Even the vintage watch my father had left me was listed with an estimated resale value. Next to each asset was a column labeled Extraction. Date. The townhouse was scheduled to be listed for sale next month. The joint savings account had a transfer date of 3 days ago. I felt a cold, clinical shock. This was not a romantic exit. This was an acquisition. The spreadsheet calculated the net worth of my existence and divided it into tranches for withdrawal. It dehumanized the betrayal completely. I was not a husband losing a wife to a better man. I was a corporation being stripped for parts. I closed the spreadsheet and saw a subfolder labeled Coaching. I put my headphones on and clicked the first audio file. The voice that filled my ears was smooth, baritone, and terrifyingly calm. It was the man from the voicemail. Silas. You are doing it wrong. Elena, the voice said. You sound angry. Anger makes him defensive. You need to sound sad. Tell him you feel invisible. Use the word suffocated. He will try to fix it, and when he fails, he will feel guilty. We need his guilt to sign the concessions. Then I heard Elena's voice, small and hesitant. I feel suffocated, Walter. I feel like I am disappearing. I froze. She had said those exact words to me over dinner 3 weeks ago. I had held her hand across the table. I had apologized for working late. I had promised to be more present. I had poured my empathy into a void created by a script. I clicked another file. He is a risk analyst. Silas said on the recording. He trusts data. Leave the note where he will find it. But make sure the environment looks chaotic. Leave a shoe out. Tilt the picture. Give him a puzzle to solve so he feels smart while he loses. My stomach turned. My instincts, my cataloging, my entire reaction had been anticipated. Silas had weaponized my own personality against me. Elena was not the villain of this story. She was a puppet. Repeating lines fed to her by a man who viewed human emotions as levers to be pulled for profit. Suddenly, the folder window on my screen flickered. A file vanished. Then another. The mouse cursor began to move on its own, sliding toward the top of the directory tree with unnatural speed. My pulse spiked. The remote access alert I had seen earlier wasn't just a ping. They had breached the firewall. They were scrubbing the drive. No, I said aloud, my voice sounding thin in the empty cabin. I tried to drag the mouse back, but the system fought me. Access denied flashed in red letters across the center of the screen. The spreadsheet file disappeared. The folder labeled coaching was next. They were burning the evidence while I watched. I could not stop the software command. The connection was too fast, and the remote admin had higher privileges. I looked at the cellular hotspot dongle plugged into the side of the laptop. The blue light was blinking rapidly, sucking the data out of the machine and into the ether. I did not try to close the window. I did not try to shut down the computer. I reached out and grabbed the plastic dongle. I yanked it out of the USB port with a violent snap. The screen froze. The cursor stopped halfway to the delete button. The connection was severed. I sat there in the dim light, chest heaving, holding the piece of plastic in my hand like a grenade pin. I looked back at the screen. The Project Liberation folder was still open. The remaining audio files were intact. I had lost the spreadsheet, but I had saved the recordings. I had the voice. I had the proof of conspiracy. I leaned back in the chair, the silence of the cabin rushing back in to fill the room. The wind howled outside, scratching pine branches against the roof. I looked at the laptop. It was no longer just a computer. It was a weapon. I had the smoking gun, and for the first time since I found the note, I knew exactly who I was aiming at. I packed the laptop into my bag. It was time to go back to the city. The drive back to the city felt less like a commute and more like a descent into a combat zone. I had the laptop strapped into the passenger seat, the hard drive humming with the evidence of a conspiracy that had turned my marriage into a line item on a spreadsheet. I pulled into the meeting point Chloe had designated. It was a desolate parking lot behind a shuttered electronics warehouse in the industrial district, the kind of place where gravel crunched loudly under tires and shadows stretched long and thin. The rain had turned the asphalt into a black mirror, reflecting the orange glow of the street lamps. I killed the engine and waited. I was expecting a terrified assistant to emerge from the darkness. Instead, a pair of headlights swept across my rearview mirror, blinding me. A sedan skidded to a halt 3 spaces away. The door flew open, and a figure stormed toward my car. It was Elena. She looked nothing like the composed woman who had left the note on the counter. Her hair was damp and plastered to her cheek. Her coat was buttoned wrong. She hammered on my window with a closed fist. I unlocked the door and stepped out. The rain hit me instantly, cold and sharp. "You froze the cards," she screamed. Her voice was shrill, cutting through the drone of the downpour. I tried to pay for the hotel, and it declined. I tried to buy gas and it declined. "You are controlling me, Walter. This is financial abuse." I stood still, letting her words wash over me. I recognized the cadence. It was the same rhythm I had heard on the recordings in the cabin. She was not speaking from her heart. She was reciting a script Silas had written for her. "I secured the assets," I said calmly. "I prevented a theft." She stepped closer, her eyes wild with a desperate sort of fury. "You are trying to punish me because I chose happiness. Silas warned me you would do this. He said, you would try to starve me out because you cannot handle losing." The mention of his name made my stomach tighten, not with jealousy, but with disgust. She was defending the butcher while standing on the chopping block. "He does not love you, Elena," I said. She laughed, a harsh, brittle sound. "You don't know anything about love. You only know logic. You think everything is a transaction." Silas sees me. He listens to me. From the shadows of the warehouse, a third voice spoke. "He is already scouting the next one, Elena." Elena spun around. Chloe stepped into the circle of light. She was younger than I expected, wrapped in an oversized trench coat, her hands deep in her pockets. She looked terrified, but she held her ground. Elena squinted at her. "Who are you?" "I am his assistant," Chloe said. Her voice shook, but she forced the words out. "I am the one who booked your hotel suite. I am the one who drafted the email with the photo of the coffee stain. And this morning, I was the one that was asked to research a divorcee in San Diego with a high liquidity portfolio." "Liar," Elena spat. She looked back at me, her face twisting. "You hired her. This is another one of your games. You hired an actress to gaslight me." "I did not hire her," I said. I reached into the car and grabbed my phone. I had synced the audio file from the laptop before I left the cabin. I swiped the screen and turned the volume to the maximum. "I want you to listen," I said. I pressed play. Silas's voice drifted out of the tiny speaker. Smooth and mocking, competing with the sound of the rain. "She is a useful idiot, Chloe. She feeds on validation. I tell her she is special, and she hands over the passwords. Once the house is listed, we liquidate the joint account and ghost her. She will be too embarrassed to sue." Elena froze. The anger drained out of her face, replaced by a slow, creeping horror. She looked at the phone, then at me, then at Chloe. "It is a recording," Elena whispered. "You could have faked it." "There is more," Chloe said softly. "He calls you the architect project. It is his internal code for your file. He complains that you talk too much about interior design. He laughs about the tilted picture frame. He says you made it too dramatic." Elena took a step back. She looked down at her hands. The narrative she had built for herself, the romance, the brave leap into freedom, was disintegrating in real time. She was not the heroine of a love story. She was the punchline of a con. I looked at my wife. For the last week, I had oscillated between heartbreak and rage. I had wanted to hurt her the way she hurt me. But standing here in the rain, watching her realize she had destroyed her life for a phantom, I felt only a profound, heavy pity. She was not a monster. She was just a person with a weakness that had been weaponized. "He told me to leave the note," Elena said, her voice barely audible. "He said it would be poetic. He wanted me to chase you," I said. "He wanted me distracted so he could drain the accounts." Elena looked up at me, water dripping from her eyelashes. Her eyes were wide and terrified. "Walter, I signed papers. Yesterday. Slept. He said they were just for the rental property we were going to buy. He said he needed power of attorney to handle the closing, because my credit was tied to yours." The air in the parking lot seemed to vanish. "What papers, Elena?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. "Everything," she sobbed. "I signed everything." Chloe stepped forward. "If she signed power of attorney, he doesn't need to wait for the house to sell. He can access the retirement funds directly. He can liquidate the bonds. He can take it all tonight." I looked at my watch. It was past midnight. Banking hours were over, but digital transfers never slept. "Where is he?" I asked Chloe. "He is at the safe house," Chloe said. "A rental property near the coast. He keeps the physical servers there. The original documents are in a safe in the basement. If he executes the transfer, The money bounces through 3 offshore shells before morning. You will never see it again. Elena grabbed my arm. Her grip was tight, desperate. Walter, please. Fix it. You always fix it. I looked down at her hand on my coat. A week ago, I would have pulled away. I would have told her she made her choice. But the analyst in me knew that was a losing strategy. We were no longer husband and wife. We were victims of the same crime, and I needed her cooperation to stop the bleeding. Get in the car, I told her. We are going to the police, Elena asked. No, I said, opening the driver's side door. The police take reports. They file paperwork. By the time they get a warrant, Silas will be on a plane, and our life savings will be in the Cayman Islands. We are going to the coast. Chloe hesitated by her own car. He has cameras, she warned. He watches everything. I know, I said. That is why we are going to catch him. I waited for them to get in. The rain hammered against the roof, sounding like applause for a show that was about to end in violence. I put the car in gear. We had a timeline, and it was running out fast. The windshield wipers fought a losing battle against the storm as we turned off the highway and onto the gravel access road Chloe had indicated. The car smelled of damp wool and fear. In the back seat, Elena sat in silence, staring out at the black wall of the forest. Her reflection in the glass, looking like a ghost haunting her own life. Chloe leaned forward from the passenger seat, her finger pointing toward a break in the trees. It is up there, she said. He calls it Trillium. It is not a cabin. It is a secure facility disguised as a vacation home. The structure emerged from the darkness like a jagged tooth of glass and steel. It had no warmth, no welcoming porch light, no chimney smoke. It was a sterile, modernist box perched on the edge of a ravine, designed to look out at the world while revealing nothing of itself. I killed the headlights 100 yards out, letting the car roll to a stop in the shadows of a massive fir tree. We stepped out into the mud. The rain was colder here near the ocean, biting into my skin. I looked at the 2 women standing with me. Elena, shivering in her designer coat, looked stripped of all her pretenses. Chloe looked determined, her jaw set tight. I realized then that I was no longer the husband trying to save a marriage, or the analyst trying to save a portfolio. I was the commanding officer of a desperate, ragtag unit behind enemy lines. Stay close, I said. My voice was low and steady. We go in, we secure the documents, and we leave. We do not stop to talk. We do not stop to argue. Chloe led us to a side door used by the cleaning staff. She punched a code into the keypad. 4 digits. 5, 2, 8, 9. The lock beeped. A harsh electronic chirp that sounded too loud in the quiet night, and the latch clicked open. The air inside was recycled and dry, smelling of ozone and expensive leather. We moved through the darkened hallway, our footsteps muffled by thick industrial carpet. Chloe did not take us to the living room or the master bedroom. She led us straight to a heavy oak door at the end of the hall. This is where he works, she whispered. I pushed the door open and clicked on the flashlight from my phone. The beam cut through the darkness and revealed a room that made my blood run cold. It was not a home office. It was a war room. One wall was covered in a whiteboard filled with flowcharts. At the top of each column was a woman's name. I swept the light across the board. Sarah, Jessica, Elena. Under each name were bullet points listed in black marker. Net worth, liquidity, emotional triggers, isolation status. It was a production line of heartbreak. Elena made a small, choked sound. I moved the light to her column. Under emotional triggers, Silas had written 3 words: boredom, vanity, romance. She stared at the words, her hand covering her mouth. The validation she had craved, the feeling of being special that she had thrown our marriage away for, was reduced to a tactical weakness on a whiteboard. She wasn't his soulmate. She was just a project with a high yield. I moved to the desk. It was dominated by 3 large monitors and a server tower that hummed with a low, menacing vibration. Piles of manila folders sat in neat stacks. I began rifling through them, my hands moving with the speed of panic. I needed the power of attorney. I needed the transfer authorization she had signed yesterday. Found it, I said. I pulled a thick document from the stack. It was the transfer order, signed by Elena, authorizing the liquidation of our joint holdings into a shell company account in the Cook Islands. It was dated for tomorrow morning. We were hours away from zero. I shoved the papers into my jacket. Check the drawers, I told Chloe. Look for the hard drives. We need everything. Chloe pulled open the bottom drawer and froze. She reached in and pulled out a stack of memory cards, each labeled with a date. He records them, she said, her voice trembling. I shone the light on the shelf behind the desk. Hidden between the spines of 2 law books was a small, black circle. A lens. A faint red light blinked rhythmically next to it. He is recording us right now, I said. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. Silas did not just steal money. He gathered leverage. If we went to the police, he would release videos of Elena, intimate and compromising, destroying her reputation along with her credit score. He would release videos of me breaking into his home, twisting the narrative to make me look like the aggressor. This was his insurance policy. I grabbed the server tower. It was heavy, anchored by cables. I didn't care. I ripped the cords from the wall, sparking a small flash of blue electricity. I am taking the whole thing, I said. Walter, Elena said. She was standing by the window, looking out at the driveway. Her voice was flat, detached. We have what we came for, I said, hoisting the tower under my arm. Let's move. Walter, she said again, louder this time. I looked up. Through the floor-to-ceiling glass, I saw what she saw. At the end of the long, winding driveway, a pair of high-intensity xenon headlights cut through the rain. A car had pulled across the entrance, blocking the only exit. The engine idled, sending plumes of white exhaust into the night air. The lights did not move. The car did not approach. It just sat there, a silent sentinel sealing us in. He is here, Chloe whispered. I looked at the heavy server in my arms, then at the terrified women, then at the blocking car. The haste was over. The siege had begun. I set the tower down and walked to the door, locking the deadbolt with a loud, final click. We were not getting out without a fight. The headlights of the blocking sedan burned 2 white holes in the darkness, blinding us to the driver behind the wheel. We were trapped in the glass box of the house, and the only way out was through the man who had engineered our destruction. I looked at the server tower on the floor, then at the USB drive in my hand. It was too small, too easy to lose, and too important to carry in a pocket. I knelt down and unlaced my left boot. The heavy leather tongue pulled back, and I slid the primary drive deep into the lining against my ankle. I retied the laces tight. The pressure against the bone was grounding. It was a physical reminder that I carried the truth. I stood up and grabbed a blank flash drive from the desk. I pressed it into Elena's cold, trembling hand. If he asks for the data, you give him this, I said. Do not hesitate. You give it to him and you step behind me. Elena nodded, her eyes wide and fixed on the car outside. She looked like she was about to shatter. Chloe stood by the door, her hand deep in the pocket of her trench coat. her knuckles white as she gripped her phone. "We are going out there," I said. We stepped out of the heavy oak door and into the storm. The rain was torrential now, a curtain of water that soaked us to the skin within seconds. The wind coming off the ravine screamed through the fir trees. We walked down the gravel path, the stones crunching loudly under our feet, until we reached the edge of the driveway. The door of the sedan opened. Silas stepped out. He did not look like a criminal. He looked like a man arriving for a board meeting. He wore a dark raincoat over a suit, and he opened a large black umbrella with a calm, deliberate motion. He walked toward us, stopping just outside the range of the house lights, forcing us to squint into the darkness to see his face. "Walter," he said. His voice was projected perfectly over the sound of the rain. "And Elena. I see you brought the help." He looked at Chloe with a sneer of dismissal. He was arrogant, protected by the belief that he was the smartest person in any room. "Get out of the way, Silas," I said. I stepped in front of the women, shielding them with my body. Silas laughed. It was a dry, hollow sound. "You have my property, Walter. You have my server. You have my files. You are trespassing. I could call the police right now and have you all arrested for corporate espionage." "Call them," I said. "I want them to see what is on those drives." Silas took a step closer. The umbrella cast a shadow over his eyes. "You are an analyst, Walter. You understand leverage. You think you have the advantage because you have the raw data. But I have the context. I have videos of your wife that will make sure she never shows her face in this city again. I have emails from your account, which I spoofed, authorizing risky trades that will trigger an SEC investigation. If you walk away with that drive, I burn you both down." Elena made a small, wounded sound behind me. Silas smiled. He knew where the buttons were. He had installed them himself. "Give me the drive," Silas said, holding out his hand. "And I will let you keep the house. I will let you keep your dignity." I felt Elena move. She reached out, her hand shaking, offering the decoy drive. Silas looked at it, his eyes gleaming with the satisfaction of a predator that has cornered its prey. But I did not let her give it to him. I reached back and grabbed her wrist. "No," I said. Silas's face hardened. "You are making a mistake. The transfer is already queued, Walter. I have her signature on the power of attorney. I have the authentication codes. By the time the banks open, the money will be bouncing through 3 different shell corps in the Caribbean. You cannot stop the transaction." I saw Chloe move in my peripheral vision. She shifted her weight, turning her body slightly away from the wind. She pulled her phone from her pocket, keeping the screen pressed against her coat. Her thumb moved over the glass. 1. But she did not press send yet. She looked at me, her eyes asking the question. I needed him to say it clearly. I needed him to brag. "You are lying," I said, pitching my voice to be heard over the wind. "You cannot touch the accounts. I froze them. You are just a thief trying to bluff his way out of a parking lot." Silas stepped closer, his composure cracking just enough to reveal the narcissist underneath. "I am not a thief," he spat. "I am an architect. I do not steal money. I acquire it from people who are too stupid to protect it. And you did not freeze everything. You missed the brokerage account linked to her maiden name. I set that up 6 months ago. The power of attorney she signed yesterday gives me full liquidity." Chloe pressed her thumb down. The screen on her phone flashed green. The call was connected. The line to the emergency operator was open. I took a step toward him. "You coerced her," I said. "You manipulated a vulnerable woman into signing documents she did not understand. That is fraud, Silas. That is grand larceny. Silas laughed again. Louder this time. Coercion implies force, Walter. She begged me to take control. She wanted a savior. I just charged a consulting fee. The law does not protect people from their own bad decisions. I have the documents. I have the signature. It is legal, and it is done. He had admitted to the plan. He had admitted to the control. He had admitted to the transfer. And he had done it on a recorded government line. Silas reached into his jacket. For a second, I thought he was reaching for a weapon. My muscles coiled. I was ready to tackle him into the mud. I was ready to take the hit. But he pulled out a phone. I am going to execute the transfer now, he said. And then I am going to call security to have you removed. He looked down at his screen. I looked at Chloe. She nodded. Do it, I said. Silas paused, his thumb hovering over his screen. He looked up, sensing the shift in the air. The fear was gone from my face. The desperation was gone from Elena's posture. We were just standing there, watching him. Why are you looking at me like that? He asked. Because you missed a variable, I said. A sound cut through the noise of the storm. It started as a low wail in the distance, rising and falling with the wind. Then it grew sharper, louder. A piercing mechanical scream that echoed off the ravine walls. Blue and red lights shattered the darkness at the end of the driveway, reflecting off the wet pavement and the sleek metal of Silas's car. Silas spun around. He looked at the lights, then back at us. His face went pale, the arrogance draining away to reveal the cowardice beneath. You called them, he whispered. We didn't just call them, I said. We kept them on the line. They heard everything, Silas. They heard about the power of attorney. They heard about the shell corpse. They heard you admit that you engineered the whole thing. Silas dropped his phone. It hit the mud with a wet thud. He looked at the woods, then at his car, calculating a run. But the first cruiser was already skidding to a halt behind his sedan, blocking him in completely. Officers were spilling out, weapons drawn, their voices shouting commands over the roar of the rain. Hands in the air, a voice boom. Step away from the vehicle. Silas looked at me one last time. His eyes were wide, vacant circles of shock. He raised his hands slowly, the umbrella tumbling from his grip and rolling away into the dark. I felt Elena slump against my back, her legs finally giving out. I reached around and held her up. Chloe stepped closer, and the three of us stood together in the rain, a solid wall of witness against the man who had tried to dismantle us. I watched as the officers forced Silas against the hood of his car. I watched the handcuffs click around his wrists. It was not a violent takedown. It was procedural. It was cold. It was the system correcting an error. The officer nearest to us approached, his flashlight sweeping over our faces. Are you the ones who called? He asked. I reached down and pulled the USB drive from my boot. It was warm against my skin. Yes, I said. And we have the evidence. The red and blue lights of the police cruisers eventually faded, replaced by the harsh fluorescent glare of courtrooms and deposition tables. The legal process was not swift, but it was absolute. With the server secured, and the testimony from Chloe on record, the case against Silas was airtight. He was indicted on 14 counts of wire fraud and identity theft. The whiteboard in his office, with its columns of victims and calculated triggers, became Exhibit A. The jury did not see a financial genius. They saw a predator. Elena avoided prison. The district attorney viewed her as a co-conspirator under duress, a pawn in a larger game who had been manipulated into signing her own destruction. But she did not escape the consequences. She left the marriage with nothing but her clothes and the crushing weight of her own choices. The last time I saw her was at the final settlement hearing. She looked smaller, her posture folded inward. She signed the papers that dissolved our 12 years together. Without looking me in the eye. She had wanted a cinematic life. She ended up as a cautionary tale in a court transcript. I kept the townhouse. For weeks, it felt like living in a museum of a failed relationship. Every corner held a memory of the domestic choreography I used to rely on. The empty spot on the rug. The silence in the kitchen. But I did not catalog the absence anymore. I changed the environment. I bought gallons of paint, a deep, warm navy blue, and covered the sterile gray walls Elena had chosen. I moved the furniture. I threw away the slate coasters. I filled the space not with silence, but with music I liked, played loudly enough to vibrate the floorboards. I was no longer preserving a crime scene. I was building a home. 6 months after the arrest, I met Chloe at a small coffee shop in the city. She looked different. The oversized trench coat was gone, replaced by a bright yellow jacket. She was working at a nonprofit now, helping victims of financial fraud navigate the legal system. We did not talk about the rain or the cabin or the server tower. We talked about books. We talked about the future. When she laughed, it was not the nervous sound of a terrified witness, but the genuine sound of a friend. I sat there, holding my cup, and realized I was not analyzing the interaction for risks. I was not looking for an exit strategy. I was just a man enjoying a conversation. The fortress of solitude I had built to survive my childhood, and then reinforced to survive my marriage, had been dismantled brick by brick. I had learned that trust was a liability, but I had also learned that isolation was a slow death. I walked home through the city streets. The air crisp and clear. I thought about the note Elena had left on the granite counter. I need freedom. Don't look for me. For a long time, I thought those words were a rejection of my existence. Now, I understood them differently. She had chased a phantom version of freedom and found a cage. I had been forced into a cage and found the strength to break the bars. I unlocked my front door and stepped into the house. It smelled of fresh paint and roasted coffee. It did not look staged. It looked lived in. I had filed for divorce. I had frozen the accounts. I had gone on vacation. And in the end, I had done exactly what the note asked, but in a way she never intended. I stopped looking for the wife who left me, and I found the man who survived her. I closed the door, locking out the noise of the world, and for the first time in a long time, the silence did not feel empty. It felt like a beginning. Total Ward Q&Ts, all parts 6950 words,